Hey everyone, this is going to be a little bit different than my regular videos. And I always have these hobbies that I'm trying to do. I like to do things that are new. I like to add something that's outside of my regular work and responsibility. I have some what I feel like a little bit of a heavy weight sometimes in my work, and it's meaningful, and I'm honored to do it. But I also like to find some things where I can sort of step away from that and do things differently. That's why I do songwriting. I love music. I love to have movie nights with my family. I like to make things. I like to build. I build these Telecaster guitars. I have, different hobbies like that. And one of them that intrigued me recently, it was actually must have been a video I came across somehow. Maybe it was shared on social media, or I came across it through YouTube or another place. Was I more recently came across this treasure hunt that many of you have heard about. So there's this book. I'll share it with you right here. It's called "There's Treasure Inside," and it's by Jon Collins-Black. And this is a guy who, in the last year, he was actually working on it for a number of years, but he was part of the Forest Fen treasure hunt. And you can Google that and look for it, learn a little bit about it if you want. And he was kind of intrigued by that. He's a guy who has a long kind of history and interest in mystery and games and treasure hunting. And he actually was boots on the ground in the Rocky Mountains for quite a while looking for that Forest Fen treasure hunt. And he also, my understanding is that he came upon quite a bit of wealth. I'm not sure how that came about. I think maybe it was through investment in Bitcoin and some other maybe business ventures and some things like that. So he's been blessed with quite a few financial resources. And I believe it was during COVID that he decided he was going to create an actual nationwide treasure hunt. And he started planning and thinking through it. He did not give details to his family and friends so that they would not be they would not be tracked down for clues or anything. And he started by collecting treasures that were meaningful to him. And some of these are treasures that are very, very, very old. So having the book in front of me right now, there's a 96 carat emerald. There's a 120 carat sapphire. There's a physical Bitcoin. There's a signed Amelia Earhart autograph photo. There is a golden chalice. There's a diamond sapphire brooch that was Jackie Kennedy Onassis. And so I'm not sure the total amount. I think I've heard and read up to maybe a few $1 million or suggested. And he didn't just hide one box. He actually hid 5 different boxes. So one of them, many people, there's a whole community that's begun to emerge around this treasure hunting now. You can find groups on Reddit and Facebook and on YouTube and in a lot of different places you can find, and some call the largest box the lion's share box, because in the text he talks about the lion's share of the treasure is in this largest box. I don't think he ever actually names it as the lion's share box, but he notes that one is there, and the book includes a number of chapters. So it has a part 1 and a part 2, and there are 23 chapters. And as I understand it, the first 23 chapters are primarily hidden and within and woven within the stories of each chapter are clues to the that largest box. And then in part 2, there's a chapter that's for a box called the Forest Fen box, and that's one of the smaller boxes. And all of the clues necessary to find that box are within that one chapter. Same thing is true for the next one called the Pokemon box. All of the clues necessary to find that treasure are within that one chapter. Then the past and future box, all of the clues, again, to find that one treasure are within that one chapter. And then there's the Appalachian footpath box. And he's also noted in the book that he's tried to hide the treasures. He didn't say exactly. There are no 2 treasures in one state, has been noted. but he also has said that he's tried to hide the treasures around the country so that everyone is within some kind of reasonable distance if they wanted to be able to search for one or more of the treasures. And then at the very end of the book, and don't worry, I'm going to get into this, and I will tie in the kinds of things that are usually on my channel here along the way, though, is a poem called Joy's Serenade. And and my understanding is as best as I can tell, that poem is primarily pointing to the largest box treasure. There have been different theories. If you follow the community at times, I'd heard some people talk about how they think that the different stanzas of the poem are pointing to different parts. So what's interesting to me about this, though, is first of all, some of you know that I am an instructional designer by training. That was one of my trades, one of the skill sets that I've developed. And I've been part of designing over 20 different academic programs. I've been a part of designing in the online and blended learning space, hundreds of different courses and then learning experiences. And in my prior life also, I designed a number of massive open online courses that were these courses that had thousands of people that were participating, and some of them actually got a lot of traction and a lot of attention. One of them that was quite famous was a course on cheating, academic integrity and cheating, and it was called Cheat MOOC, and it had all sorts of different learning experiences that were kind of creative learning experiences. There was a cheating confessional in the course where people could go and share how they cheated and never got caught. Because most of the strategies to reduce or mitigate cheating in schools are based upon the bad cheaters, the people who got caught. And so I actually thought, well, wouldn't it be fun to create a cheating confessional where people could kind of confidentially come in and they wanted to tell their story under the kind of the bank robber theory of the bank robber who just can't keep their mouth closed. They just have to tell someone about how clever they were. So I created a venue where people could anonymously talk about how they engaged in cheating, academic integrity. And I collected what was, to the best of my knowledge, and maybe it still is, the largest collection of case studies on cheating and academic integrity and maybe in history, who knows. And I also created a number of games and experiences in there. For example, one week, we did the psychology of cheating, the philosophy of cheating, cultural perspectives on cheating, different units like that. And during one week, I actually created a series of assignments, and the job of everyone in the class was to cheat. Their job was to try to get the highest possible grade with the least amount of effort without getting caught. And then afterward, those who were successful, they got a very high grade and they didn't get caught and they cheated, actually earned a digital badge that actually had a little message underneath it that said, "I did not earn this badge honestly." It was the cheating badge. And so I've done a lot of design that way. And in my prior life also, I designed a graduate program, an educational design and technology program. It was inspired by Stanford's very well-known learning design and technology program. And I have done consulting over the years for a lot of different organizations on learning experience design and product development, especially educational products and things like that. So that's all this background. I'm going to tie this all together. If you stay with me, if you have stuck around for the 8 or 9 minutes so far, stay with me. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this, really kind of take you on a journey. But along the way, one of the courses that I designed and I taught a graduate course in game design and game-based learning. And I became very intrigued for years. Probably I spent over a decade studying alternate reality games. And these are games that have a kind of intersection of the real world, and then there's a game environment that's placed on top of it. So you don't quite know if you're in the game or you're not at times. And sometimes they're games that are more contained at a specific location for a specific time, and everyone kind of knows that they're in it. And yet others are not. And I've been intrigued by escape rooms and other kinds of models of using wonder and mystery and curiosity and these game-like experiences to take people on a sort of journey. So I became intrigued by Jon Collins-Black's experiment here. his treasure hunt, because it is a massive national game, and it's gotten a lot of attention. I'm not sure how many people are participating, if it's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or more. I would guess this book is not inexpensive. I think it sells for $30, $40 or a little bit more. It's a hardback book, but I think it's very possible that by the time this is done, he will have made more money selling the books than he had spent on the treasures that he put in the treasure boxes, if the treasure boxes are indeed less than $3 million. I think that's an actual possibility, that he could generate more revenue through the treasure hunt than he spent on it. So it could actually be a business model. And I can see in the future, especially in this increasingly digital world where people are feeling disconnected, these kinds of alternate reality games, these games where you are being invited out into nature and connecting with the world around you, these kinds of experiences. This one obviously has a financial motive. People get a financial motive, but as I'll talk about in a little bit, the author is hoping that people will get more out of it, even if they never discover anything. They're going to get out in nature. They'll experience the beauty of creation and the wonder of it, and they're going to get moving. There's physical activity involved, all sorts of things. So this was right up my alley. I was really intrigued by it. I think Jon Collins-Black, he as I've learned more about him, he was a musician and before this, and he took a trip to Japan and kind of left, moved away from the music industry, and somewhere along that line, he also met who is now his wife, and he's had kids, and so he's in a different part of his life journey right now, and so this treasure, and he seems to be financially independent, so he has the time to be able to work on experiments and projects like this. So that's where there's treasure inside. This national treasure hunt has emerged. So here's what I thought might be really interesting. I'm going to actually do some videos. I will be participating in this and observing this. As an ethnographic researcher, I am intrigued by how people are engaging. And so I'm spending a little bit of time. Obviously, my work doesn't allow me to immerse myself in this day and night or anything like that. But on weekends and occasion, I might even take a day off or two to do a boots on the ground visit. I do have a couple of treasures where I have a 50% plus level of confidence that I might be in the right area for a couple of the treasures, but who knows? And and yet I'm going to be exploring this as an ethnographic researcher. I'm going to be following how people approach the treasure hunt and how they think about it. And here's one thing that I wanted to talk about today specifically. So when I approach this as an ethnographic researcher, I'm looking for sort of cultural trends and patterns. I'm studying communities. And so studying the treasure hunting community is really where my skill set resides. But I couldn't help but step outside of my own little discipline and think about this. Because here's the thing that's fascinating about a treasure hunt like this. And it might even clash with some of what I sense is the philosophy that seems to be emerging from Jon Collins-Black himself and his own sort of belief system and values. But I could be wrong. I've never met him. But a treasure hunt is unforgiving of whims and opinions. In other words, you can get as creative and whimsical and as imaginative as you want in the treasure hunt. And maybe you'll discover something that's completely unrelated to the treasure, and it's your own treasure, right? Your metaphorical treasure, and that's worth it. And I do think that's actually part of what Jon Collins-Black is wanting to happen from this. But when it comes to actually discovering the treasure, it's an actual physical treasure. There are 5 of them. And your opinions don't ultimately matter. The question is, have you been able to identify which aspects of the book are clues and put those clues together in a way that leads you to the treasure or not? You know, it doesn't matter whether you feel like the treasure is somewhere or not. Yes, obviously your instincts, you can follow instincts, and instincts can be fueled and inspired by information that you're gathering along the way. But in a contemporary world where sometimes people like to think that that most and that all of life maybe is largely subjective, and it just depends upon what you believe and what you want to be true. Treasure hunts are not that way. If you want the treasure to be under that rock in that location that you're convinced that's where he put it, and you go there and you look and the treasure is not there, your wants did not happen. Your opinions did not matter. There is an objectivity to a treasure hunt. And so the other piece of this, though, is that when you're doing this treasure hunt, then that means you have to come to understand the rules. While Jon Collins-Black, every game has rules and has willing players, but Jon Collins-Black has not given all the rules of the game. He has said that that everything that you need in order to find the treasures is in that book. That book is enough to lead you to the clues that can lead you to the treasure, and so he has said that, but he hasn't actually told you the details. Like when you're playing a game like Monopoly, you know more explicit rules and you know how the rules work. When you're in this book, you don't actually know what is a clue and what is not a clue. And when you go through the different chapters, the first part of the book, the first 23 chapters, those are largely stories about key figures and characters. And then he highlights the treasures, some of the treasures that are included in the different boxes. So in the process of going through all of these different, he tells the story of some really remarkable people along the way and introduces you to these people. And so it's very clear that he's wanting this book to be meaningful, even if you never go on a treasure hunt. That it would be intriguing for you to learn about these different treasures, the gold and the gems and the other items, and to learn about the people and the stories of the people that he tells in each chapter. And then somehow, woven within those stories and within this book somehow, are the clues that can lead you to the treasure if you discover them. So, here's what I love about this, though, is when we are trying to learn something, it's really important for us to make this distinction between objectivity and subjectivity. And when I'm studying the treasure hunting community, I see a lot of people who are really leaning into their instincts and their feelings and their style. It's as if they're trying to impose their mind and their way of thinking on Jon Collins-Black. And we all do that to some extent, right? It's really hard to get out of our own head and to try to put ourselves in the mind or the shoes of the other person. But part of a treasure hunt does involve doing that. Part of a treasure hunt does involve trying to ask the question, who is this person and how do they think about a treasure hunt? How do they think about clues? And that then can guide you in how you make sense of the book. So here's what I did. And again, I'm an ethnographic researcher by training. My background, actually, I have degrees in educational or instructional technology, instructional design, and philosophy, history, the spiritual, ethical, social implications of technology in society. I've done a lot of research in that area. I have a master's degree in humanities and interdisciplinary studies, and another graduate degree in education and curriculum design, and I studied a lot of design principles. I am not a psychologist by training, but I have taught graduate courses that involve a great deal of cognitive psychology, and I've done a bit of reading of psychology. I've read a few hundred psychology books over my life, but I'm definitely not an expert. Reading a few hundred books doesn't make you an expert for sure. So here's what I did is I have actually used AI as a guide to help me kind of gather some of these data, but a lot of the analysis is me. I'm not just putting in a little bit of information and asking ChatGPT to give me a profile. But I've kind of imagined myself, and I've did a little bit of reading about how do profilers work, how do psychological profilers work, and I've been trying to put together a psychological profile of Jon Collins-Black to help guide my thinking about how he hides the treasure. But again, as an ethnographic researcher, I'm really interested in studying the culture of treasure hunters as part of this, and just informally observing. I'm not doing any formal study of people. I'm just kind of learning and watching and participating. But as a participant in the treasure hunt, I'm also interested in this psychological profile. And so for those of you who this is the first time that you've ever heard about this treasure hunt, some of the stuff that I'm talking about with his profile may not be of any interest to you at all. But if you're part of this treasure hunting community, you may find some of this a little bit interesting. And maybe you'll disagree with me too. But here's my assessment so far, and I've jotted down some notes that I'm going to walk through. First of all, if you really want to get to understand him, I've watched a number of videos of interviews with him. I've watched his mannerisms, his word choice. I've tried to contrast his word choice in the videos compared to his word choice in the books. I look at the way he uses metaphor, the way he tends to talk more concretely. Obviously, he's trying to be really careful in the interviews to not give away too many clues and things like that. But here's one of the things that I've come to recognize. First, I do not think he is a trickster. I don't think there is any really big surprise twist. There's no big magic cipher. I don't think that he's really trying to test people. As best as I can tell, I think he's actually inviting people into a journey. He's inviting people to experience more wonder and joy in their life, and that really is a fundamental part of his mission and his goal here. That there's some people that are going to find the treasure, but he's trying to design something so that those who don't find the treasure are going to say, wow, this was worth it regardless. I didn't find anything, but this was well worth it. At his core, I believe that he is a narrative architect. So he's a poet, kind of disguised as a curator. He's a man who sees the world as a vast and layered story, one that you enter not by breaking codes, but by entering into the meaning that he's trying to share with you in his stories. I know it sounds a little bit philosophical, but this is really important for someone who wants to be part of this treasure hunt to understand that difference. He is not trying to just give you a bunch of really complex codes to break. As best as I can tell, this is just my observation. I could be completely wrong. I believe he's a synthesizer of disciplines. When he talked about his college experiences, he likes to synthesize mythology and history and music and spirituality and science and just sort of living with soul, you might say. And then woven across those are some themes and some patterns. So he's gonna communicate a message by layering different stories, and those different stories will have some commonalities in them. And there's a pattern. Now, the thing that's interesting is I actually communicate this way a lot myself. And so I may actually be susceptible to what I was saying a little bit earlier in the video, where I'm imposing my mind and my thinking on him. But I see it so clearly in the way that he communicates. He's a global thinker. I know he's not a detail person for sure, and yet he's had to force himself to be a little bit more organized and detail-oriented for the sake of this treasure hunt. But his predominant personality is a narrative architect and a storyteller, and one who likes to layer stories. It's really clear. So what I mean by layering stories is you could just tell one story that is really clear, and it progresses from the beginning and then all the way by the time you get to the end, you get there. Or what you could do is you could tell 10 stories, and each story is like a part of the puzzle. Each story is a part of a bigger story, and you have to kind of go through the stories, and by the time you're done with them, you just sort of stop and pause and you think, oh, those stories kind of come together and they sort of point to a place, or they point to a common theme or an idea, and that's really valuable. But again, not in a code breaking kind of way, more in a narrative storytelling kind of way. So it's not like really tricky with names of people, and I've seen some people who are really going down the rabbit hole with some of these clues, and maybe they're what they call solves are on, but in my mind, that is not how a narrative storyteller, a layering storyteller tends to think or work in the way that some of them are going about this. They're thinking they're code breaking, and as opposed to story layering. He is a synthesizer of disciplines. I think he's on the introvert side, more introverted and empathetic. He doesn't just retell stories, but he really savors them. and reveres them, that these are things that mean something to him. Now, it's kind of interesting, though, because when I hear him talking on the videos versus in the book, he's much more romantic in the book than he is whenever he's being interviewed. When he's being interviewed, he comes off pretty guarded, maybe because he doesn't want to give away clues, but he's not opening up. He's very closed, and I think maybe part of that is just his introversion that's coming through. But it's hard to tell what's introversion and what's just him trying to not give away where the treasures are. What's intrigued me, though, is I would love to see people who interview him in the future. I'd love to see some people interview him who invite him to talk about his poetic side, the storyteller part of him, the narrative part of him, because most people have been just looking for clues from him in their interviews, as opposed to just, let's get to know each other. I want to get to know you better. Tell me about your love of music. What do you love about music? What's it like to play music? And what do you like about poetry? And I know you took these classes in college. Just tell me about you and who you are and what your interests are. I'm not trying to get any clues or anything like that explicitly. I just want to get to know you better. And if you did that, if someone does that in an interview, I think they're going to get a very, very different side of Jon Collins-Black. And it might actually help them understand the book a little bit better. Just my theory. So I would say that he is a romantic and a humanist. He's driven by a longing to restore wonder and harmony and beauty in what he likely sees as an increasingly fragmented world. And so he wants to invite people to see that there is something really, really true and good and beautiful and wondrous and joy-worthy. And he talks about his Christian upbringing. I'm not sure if that's something he attaches to today. This is so unfair. I don't mean to judge, but I see that in his book, I see kind of themes of like a pantheistic Christian sort of theme. There's some other religious themes that sort of merge with some traditional Christian themes and the like. But he's certainly romantic and values spirituality and spiritual themes in what he's doing. So how does he design clues then? What does this say? So, one more other thing I'll just note I wrote down is he is not the kind of guy who hides treasure to be clever. He's not hiding treasures to be clever. He's hiding treasures to create joy, to create moments like aha moments and wonder moments. He wants the hunt to be meaningful. And at one point I even jotted down the thought, I think he's on a healing journey himself, as we all are in different ways, and he's wanting people to experience a little bit of healing in the journey. And yet he also wants people to sort of earn the treasures that they seek. So that's that first part. That's my little psychological profile. I don't know if I were the one who designed this game and this treasure, and I had someone doing what I just did to him. I think I'd feel a little bit vulnerable. And I'm not judging him. I could be completely off. I am judging. I mean, I am assessing his personality traits as best as I can tell. But let's kind of dive into the next part then. So if this is true, if I have this general picture, this general personality sort of profile correct, how does he design clues? What does this tell me about how he is likely to design clues? I would say not with riddles and rhymes alone. While he uses them, and he's clearly inspired by other treasure hunters and hunts and games that have been designed in the past. So he is kind of a collector of those different practices, and he's woven some of those into his clues. No question about that. But again, not puzzles to solve, but they're layers to uncover. So you're kind of, there's a story, and there's a layer underneath it, keep going, and all of a sudden you start to see that it's like there's a hole in each of the stories, and the holes line up to point you to where the treasure might be. I would say his clue style is metaphorical and not mathematical. And for those who are obsessed with that word search, for example, there's a word search in one of those. I would say that's one of the mistakes, is there are these mathematically minded and cryptology minded people, and they are perceiving him to be that way. And I don't see any evidence of that anywhere else. He's said he's not a detailed person. He was a musician. I mean, all the things that I've learned about him, I don't see any evidence that he's that's how he thinks, that he is a metaphorical person more than a mathematical person. You're not solving equations. You're listening for like resonance, looking for patterns. He's symbolic, likes to use symbolism, but they're anchored in real places. So not overly symbolic, and you're not looking for these really, really esoteric clues. But once some of the treasures are found, I believe that people will see, oh, well, that was a lot more concrete than I realized. Yes, there was a symbolism, but it was pointing to a very concrete, much simpler kind of solver path than they realized. Um, and um, and so they're not random. He does, like, he kind of encodes values in geography, and I don't know if I even understand what I'm saying there enough to talk about it, but that was kind of one of my notes. Was I think that he takes this meaning and he ties it to places. Let me give you an example. So there's a book that I love by a guy named O'Brien, and it's called The Things They Carried, I believe, and it was a story of those in Vietnam War, and he describes it through the objects that people carried into the Vietnam War. It's incredibly moving, very powerful. It's a hard kind of read, but boy, does it stick with you. And so, like, a photo of a woman that a person hopes to be with when he gets back from the war, or different objects. So the object is a physical object, but it's a story. It's tied to something much more meaningful and metaphorical. I think that's what he's doing with his stories, and he's tying them to physical locations, and making them, kind of tying them to something concrete, like a photograph. But in this case, in the case of the treasure hunt, he's tying the stories to a physical place. He's a musician, and I think he's actually musical in his rhythm. His chapters are like movements in a symphony, and he's trying to create. Again, if you think about layered, think about different parts in a song, or a choir, where you have a bass and a tenor and a sopranos and altos, and different chapters are different parts of the song, and together they create a really beautiful harmony in the music. If you can hear the harmony, and I'd say he's really emotionally embedded. Clues often rest inside. He has childhood stories that he weaves in. A lot of stories about failure. I'm not sure what to make of that. Failures, and a lot of sort of self-deprecation and humility in his journey, but also all moments of wonder, real reverence for the accomplishments of different people, and this kind of the human spirit, and the achievement in the human spirit. A lot of Olympic themes in there, and the themes that people like to point to for the Olympics, when the kinds of stories people tell around the Olympics, the kinds of values that people promote around the Olympics, those are really embedded. And I would just say that's about as close as I'm getting to some of my solves, but I'd say that there's a whole lot in that, in those kind of Olympic connections and the layered stories, the number of people that were involved at the Olympics and the like. I'd say the entire book is a map, and each chapter is a waypoint. It's not of space, but on this kind of a mental journey. So, okay, last part of the video is, so where does he hide the treasure then? If I have my psychological profile, I have a sense of how that profile will lead him to create clues. What can they say to where he hides the treasure? And here were some of my observations. The question is, where would a guy like Jon Collins-Black hide his treasures? And first, we know the non-negotiables: public land only, no dangerous cliffs, no water crossing, no digging, no trespassing within 3 miles of a road but not visible from it, unlikely to be stumbled upon by accident. So all of those things he's made explicit. Those are kind of the explicit rules of the game. His treasure are not in some really deep cave or frozen waterfall, or you don't have to go underwater. You don't have to get in a water vessel to get to them. So he describes all of that kind of stuff. Instead, his boxes are in places with what I think are 3 core traits. The first one is, I think that every single box is in a place of reflection. That the person who finds it, that if they were to look around, that there would be sites with overlooks, with a long unbroken vista, a aha moment, a beautiful water feature, something that has a measure of awe and wonder. It can give you a moment of joy, but it's also solitude for the practical reason that it's easier for him to hide, but because he's also an introvert, and those are the moments that would be meaningful to him as well. I think that because of this combination of awe and wonder, I think that almost every treasure is going to be near. This is now I'm going out on the edge, near a bench, a stone, a platform, something that's actually a place that is designed, or it's in nature, but it lends itself toward being a place to sit and wonder and ponder and look and observe and look more closely. And it doesn't mean it's going to be hidden right behind that, but in that vicinity. And so the second thing I would say is I think it's going to be symbolically charged terrain, a symbolically charged location. He doesn't hide treasures in just pretty places. Like, ooh, look at that pretty waterfall. Could be by a waterfall, or could be by something else, but he or a beautiful river or something like that. But it's not just because it's a pretty place. He hides them in places that mean something, that are tied to the narratives and the stories in some kind of like a poetic way, in the way that a musician might think about writing lyrics. And there's probably a convergence of some history, some mythical metaphors and geography. He talks a lot about mythology, of different kinds of mythologies, Greek mythologies and others, and then he'll also use some very concrete juxtapositions of different physical elements that are kind of physical clues, like where the rock next to the river, the pine next to the fire, scorch, things like that, where you're at places of transition, where you can kind of compare and contrast a couple of different things that are kind of leading you to there. That's again, that's the best I can tell just from the personality assessment. And then the third one is, I think that he is. They're going to be in aha moments. That there will be that these are moments of revelation, like, oh, this revelation is like, oh, this clicks. I get it. So he talks about alignment-based orientations a lot. He talks about arcs and squares. He talks about Will's straight edge, which many people assume is Occam's razor. In natural geometry, a bend in the trail, a fork near the water, clearing marked by a lone tree. I mean, there are different things like that. And then he loves pairing, because he's poetic and musical. I think he likes layering senses. So pairing sight with sound, or pairing like a symbol with a name of something. So that the name ties to the symbol, and an emotion that's tied to a specific environment. So he likes kind of those layers of meaning. Like that book I talk about, the things they carried. Expect his hiding places to involve maybe a slight detour from the main path. I would say that if you're in paths, look for the dead ends, the ones where maybe fewer people go, but it's worth it. And a deliberate visual clue, but subtle visual clue, and something that you'll only notice once you're really in a place of reflection and kind of getting attuned to it. Of course, the boxes are all square, and so we don't know if there's something hidden over them. But sharp square spaces are not in nature largely. You see more rounded and other kinds of shapes, and so they're going to be. How it's going to be hidden. Nothing's buried, so it's going to be blended in. I don't know if he's covered it with some other things and the like. So those are my insights. And I know this is quite different from the kinds of things that I usually talk about, but I think this treasure hunt is a fascinating experiment in design that could have some real educational implications, both formal and informal, and lifelong learning. And I think that the future of treasure hunting is something we're going to see a lot. We're going to see a lot more of these kinds of treasure hunting games and experiences being created for people. as an invitation for people to connect with the world, to connect with one another, and I think it's really intriguing. So I know this is one of my longest videos, but I hope you find it interesting. And I'm actually going to have a channel, and every so often, I don't know how often I'll do these, but I'm going to do an updated video about different parts of my observation of this treasure hunt and maybe some different things that we can learn from it. So that's all I have for you. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.